On this week's podcast, you'll learn lots of ways to use the word out, O-U-T, so that you can expand your vocabulary and be an outstanding English speaker. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are things, Craig?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I can't complain, for a change. I often do complain, as Craig knows, but no, I think I'm doing okay.
I'm pleased to hear it. I'm excited to speak to you this week, Reza, about uses of out, because I was surprised at how many different collocations and words can be made from out, so I think this will be useful for the listeners.
I tell you what, maybe it's a good idea to put out at the beginning of words first. Later, we'll have some words where out is at the end of the word. So we're going to use first out as a prefix at the beginning of a word.
And let's start with a word that you may have heard in the news if you listen to the news in English, because we're recording this during a pandemic. And very often in different countries, people speak about the outbreak of a disease or the outbreak of a virus. Now that's one word, O-U-T-B-R-E-A-K. And that means that something is breaking out in the community, in the society, or in the country. So there has been an outbreak of coronavirus in the country, for example.
Would you say there's a difference between an outbreak and an epidemic?
Yes.
For me, an epidemic is much bigger than an outbreak. An outbreak could be localized, like there's been an outbreak of coronavirus in Castellón, a town near Valencia, but not in the whole of Spain.
So it's just started, hasn't it? It's just broken out. It's in the beginning.
Whereas an epidemic, it's already spread a lot. And if it's all around the world or all around Europe, it's a pandemic. So first you get the outbreak, then the epidemic, and then the pandemic.
Our next word is outburst. And one thing about these words is when you're combining out with another word like break or burst, B-U-R-S-T, and these two words come together, we can call them compound words. So if the word is a noun, it's a compound noun. If the word is a verb, it's a compound verb. And it just means that it's a word made up of two other words. So to burst is to explode. You can burst a balloon, for example. And if you have an outburst, that means that you suddenly have an emotional discharge of something. Let's imagine that you are in a court, for example. And a court is a very serious place where people practice laws, and you go if you committed a crime or if you're a witness and there's a judge, and it's very serious and very quiet. If you have an emotional outburst, that could be quite disturbing because suddenly the atmosphere changes if you have an emotional outburst.
Another common word beginning with out is to outlive. It's a verb. If you outlive someone, you live longer than them. For example, as a general kind of rule, women in Europe outlive men.
I think in most of the world, don't they? Why do you think that is? Why do you think women outlive men? Do you think there's a reason?
Who knows? Maybe they look after themselves better. Could be that.
Could be.
So they live longer than men.
In fact, I checked on the internet before we started recording. On average, women outlive men by 5 years, which is quite a lot.
Craig, do you spend a lot of time outdoors?
Not in Valencia in the summer. It's too hot. If you spend time outdoors, you go outside, which is another compound word with out. So outside, outdoors are very similar. So no, I don't go outdoors much in the summer. Do you prefer to be outdoors or indoors?
It's the same as you. In the summer in Valencia, mostly indoors, but the rest of the year, mostly outdoors. You probably guessed, listeners, did you, that indoors is the opposite of outdoors, and inside is the opposite of outside.
If you are on safari in Africa and you're with a group of people watching lions and suddenly the lion starts running towards you, you don't have to run faster than the lion. You only have to outrun the slowest person in the group. So to outrun means to run faster. So if you're being attacked by a lion or a bear, just try to outrun another person, you'll be fine.
Before we go on, can I just stop and repeat a few words that we've said? And let's see if, listeners, you can work something out about the pronunciation, or to be more exact, about the stress of these words. We had the noun and outbreak, we had the noun and outburst, and we had the verb to outrun, and we had the verb to outlive. See any pattern there?
Yes, I noticed that the verbs stress the second syllable, outrun, outlive, whereas the nouns stress the the first syllable, outbreak, outburst. Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly. We also mentioned another type of word, but we don't have a strict rule for that. Outdoors could be an adverb or an adjective. There's no rule about should I stress out or not for adjectives or adverbs. But generally speaking, for verbs, you stress the bit which is not out. So outrun, outlive. And when it's a noun, you stress out. Outbreak, for example.
The word cast, C-A-S-T, means to project or to throw. And we get the word broadcast or podcast. Or if you are a fisherman or a fisherwoman, then you cast your hook or your line out. So if you are an outcast, you are thrown or rejected from somewhere. You could be an outcast from society. You could be an outcast from your family. And there's an expression for that. You are the black sheep of the family. You are outcast and thrown out of the family circle.
Now, these days, very often, a company doesn't actually do the work that you would expect it to do because they outsource the work. They find an outside source, probably because it's cheaper. If they had to pay their own employees, it would probably cost them more money. So they contract another company and they can do it cheaper, so they save money. That is to outsource.
And the outcome of something is the end result. So if your friend has a job interview, for example, you could say, hey, what was the outcome? Did you get the job or not? Or if you make a presentation, you try to sell something, you could say, what was the outcome of the presentation? What was the outcome of the meeting? Was it successful or not? So outcome means the result of something.
Craig, you visited Australia, haven't you?
I have.
Were you in the outback?
No, we generally stayed inside cities and travelled from city to city along the coast. So the outback in Australia, the countryside, the areas away from the city, which is also called the bush. Reza, as you know, I don't tend to follow fashion. I'm not a fashion follower. My clothes are quite old and outdated. What does outdated mean?
Well, my case is exactly the same, so you speak for both of us. We are both a bit behind the times. We're outdated. In other words, our clothes are not fashionable. They might have been a long time ago, but they're not now. They're outdated.
And you know what they say, Reza? If you keep your clothes long enough, eventually they'll come back into fashion. So I'm just waiting.
So if something was fashionable, but now it's not, we just simply say that it's out. For example, red trousers are out. That means nobody's wearing them anymore. They're out. They're outdated. They're out.
And if they are fashionable, they're in. What colour is in this year? I have no idea. So Reza spoke before about the use of out as a prefix. It can have a meaning as better than when you put it together with another verb. For example, the verb do. If you outdo someone or something, then you do it better than another person. Or if your football team plays better than another football team, you can say they outplayed their opponents. So remember these are verbs. You need to conjugate the verb and change the verb according to the verb tense. They outplayed, past simple. They have outplayed. They are outplaying, etc. Can you think of other words, Reza, with a similar meaning of better than?
That word we used earlier, outrun. If you outrun somebody, you run faster than them. To outwork, to outsmart, to be smarter than somebody, to be more intelligent than them. To outperform, to perform better than another person. For example, Craig, you've outdone yourself. That was a fantastic meal you prepared, better than your normal meal. You've outdone yourself.
Well, I think you've outdone yourself with all those wonderful examples of out. And I must pay you another compliment and say that I really like the outfit you're wearing today.
Don't you find it outdated?
No, I think it's very modern, very in, and I think the outfit is very suitable for this hot weather in Valencia. Reza's wearing a red t-shirt and very nice beige shorts, so it's an excellent summer outfit. So the outfit, the clothes you're wearing, you can also have a fancy dress outfit if you go to a fancy dress party. That means you dress as a particular character or person. So you could have a cowboy outfit, for example, if you dress like a cowboy.
Now you might think the word outskirts is also related to clothes, because you think of the word skirt, perhaps. But you'd be wrong. Outskirts are not related to clothes. The outskirts of a city are the extreme limits, the very edge of a city, or just outside it, just as you're beginning to enter the city, but you're not really in the city yet. That's the outskirts of a city.
Like the suburbs.
A bit like the suburbs, yeah, but I would say even beyond the suburbs, perhaps.
Some people are naturally very shy. If you are a Spanish speaker, that's tímido or tímida. They're very quiet. They don't feel very comfortable in noisy social situations, although the opposite of that could be outgoing. If you are an outgoing person, then you like social situations, you're very friendly, you're very open, you're very talkative, you're very outgoing, or you have an outgoing personality.
Another verb with out is outshine. Now, you might think, oh, is this to do with the sun shining? Not exactly. It's used metaphorically. If one person outshines another, that means they're more impressive. I guess we could put it with our other verbs that we had earlier about being better than, like outplay, outrun, etc. So to outshine is to be more impressive than the others.
Sometimes you might have guests staying in your house or your flat. You might invite people to stay with you. And also some people say that guests are a bit like fish. They start to smell after 3 days. So if your guests start to smell and be annoying after 3 days, you could say that your guests have outstayed their welcome. So to outstay a welcome means to stay too long to the point where you start smelling like fish.
Craig, very often I am outwitted by Coco. Coco outwits me. What do I mean by outwit?
Well, if you outwit someone, you are cleverer than that person or that dog. So if you have been outwitted by Coco, then your dog is cleverer than you.
You know how he outwits me? He will do things like, when we come back from the walk, I will give him his treat. He always gets a treat for being a good boy when he's out on his walk. But sometimes I'm not sure if I've given him the treat or not. He has become a master of putting on a really pitiful face, trying to make me think that I haven't given him the treat.
He wants you to feel sorry for him.
Yeah, but I know sometimes as a fact I have given him the treat, but other times I'm not so sure. So sometimes he outwits me, he's cleverer than me, and he convinces me I haven't given him the treat, so he gets 2 treats out of me.
I think that's outstanding, Coco. Well done. I think you're very good and you should be complimented on outwitting Reza. So if something is outstanding, then it stands out. If you're a Spanish speaker, sobresalir, sobresale. So it's an outstanding piece of work, or it's an outstanding job you're doing. Well done.
Craig, everybody's heard of Microsoft Outlook these days. Is there any other type of Outlook?
You can have a positive outlook. If you're very optimistic, you can have a positive outlook on life, which means your general attitude is good. It's positive. It's nice to have a positive outlook on things.
So the word Outlook existed before computers?
Before Windows.
Wow.
Yeah, before Windows. Difficult to believe, isn't it?
And apples as well. You'll be telling me there were apples before computers now.
Yeah. In fact, computers probably outnumber apples these days. If something outnumbers something else, then there is a bigger number of it. For example, we live here in Spain fairly close to a resort town called Benidorm. It's on the Costa Blanca, the east coast of Spain, and in the summer, the tourists outnumber the residents. There are more tourists than residents in the summer. So we can say that the tourists outnumber the residents.
I've seen some tourists, not many, but I've seen a few tourists in Benidorm get genuinely upset, genuinely annoyed whenever they try to speak to someone in a shop in English and they can't, because the shop assistant in Spain can only speak Spanish. And I've seen people get genuinely upset about it. So like, what? You can't speak English? No. Living in Spain, they can't imagine that because the tourists outnumber the locals.
I can imagine that because where my sister lives, which is fairly close to Benidorm, there is a big expat community and there are businesses owned by English people who do not speak Spanish. So it is fairly common to walk into a cafe and ask for a drink in Spanish in Spain, and the owner of the business doesn't understand you, which I think is a big problem.
You may have noticed, listeners, sometimes that only on a few occasions it's difficult to understand what I'm saying. There are many reasons for this, but one could be a technical reason. Sometimes I just speak too loud and I don't use the microphone very well. And because of excessive output, you might notice that sometimes my output is a bit too loud. Oh, did I just do it again?
Yep, you did it again.
Yeah,
Too much output.
Too much output. So what you produce is your output. So sometimes I forget that microphones are delicate and I produce too much volume. So my output is too high and this causes technical problems for Craig at the mixing desk. So I apologize if occasionally my output makes the audio quality a bit tricky for you listeners to understand.
Of course, the opposite of output is input, and you very often see those two words on electrical devices. The input is where the wire or cable or current, if it's electrical, goes in, and obviously the reverse is where it goes out. But you can also use this word for a business where you can speak about the output of the company. So our current output in the factory is twice as much as it was last year.
I've got one more word for you. It's quite a long word, but I think it's a fairly useful word. Difficult to pronounce. Outmaneuver. Well, maybe I should take away the prefix first and just explain the word maneuver. To maneuver means to move. It comes from French. That's why it has unusual spelling. And if you outmaneuver someone, I better spell that. Outmaneuver, outmaneuver, you maneuver better than them. You maneuver, in other words, you plan, design, you act, you react, you participate in some kind of competitive way better than them, and you win. You've outmaneuvered.
So that is our list of words that have out as a prefix. And if you want to see a list of these words, go to the website inglespodcast.com where you'll find a list for this episode. But now let's move on to using out as a suffix. And suffixes go at the end of the word. So the word out will be at the end here. What's the first word, Reza?
Well, listeners, do you remember our very first word with a prefix? It was outbreak. Well, our very first word with a suffix is breakout. That's right. I've changed the order around. This time I'm putting break first and out second. But it's a completely different meaning. Craig spoke about an outbreak of a virus, for example. There's been an outbreak of coronavirus in a part of Spain. It's a new occurrence of it. It's new. It hasn't happened there before. It's an outbreak. But a breakout is not the same thing. A breakout is whenever people break out. It can be a phrasal verb as well, to break out. If they break out of prison, for example, they illegally escape, it's a breakout. So outbreak and breakout are not the same thing.
Dropout is our next word, so D-R-O-P, out, dropout. You can be a dropout from society, which means you leave society and decide to live in the forest with the trees, for example. And you can also drop out of school, so there's dropout as a verb. But it's also a noun because you're called a dropout. You've dropped out of school. Do you know anyone who dropped out of school, Reza?
I know of lots of famous people who've dropped out of school because they tend to be incredibly successful.
Yeah, there must be a reason for that. Zuckerberg and
David Bowie.
Steve Jobs. Lots of dropouts.
Is Steve Jobs a dropout?
Yeah.
The next word is a word connected to computers. Printout. It's a noun, but it could be a phrasal verb. If we separate them, I'm going to print this document out. So I'm going to make a printout of this document. So it's in the computer, in digital form. I'm going to put it onto paper, and now it will be a printout.
I'm sure you know the word cut, C-U-T. So you cut with a knife, or you can cut with a pair of scissors. But when you combine it with out, a cutout, it's something that you have cut out of card, for example, or material. So you have a cutout of something.
A checkout is a place where you pay in a supermarket or a shop. So you collect the products you're going to buy, and then you go to the checkout, the place where they have the cash register or till, the machine where they put the money in. That area is called the checkout.
One thing to notice, if you separate these words, you do have a phrasal verb which can be used obviously as a verb. So you can also say to drop out, to print out, to cut out. But we're looking at them as compound nouns here, which means that the words are written together. The next one is turnout, a turnout. Imagine you have a party, a barbecue, lots of people come. You could say to your partner, oh, the turnout was better than expected. Or you organise a party or a meeting or some kind of event and lots of people come, you can say, oh, it was a really good turnout today. Lots of people attended.
Craig, imagine that you were made redundant. How would you feel about living on government handouts?
It depends how much they were. If they were high enough, I'd feel okay about it, I think.
Me too. I'd say, where do I sign?
If it wasn't my fault and I got a good handout from the government. So to hand out, the verb means to give somebody something. And a handout, the noun, is something you receive. Of course, if you've ever studied in an English class, you've probably been given handouts from the teacher with exercises. A piece of
money?
paper.
No,
well, probably not money. Exercises on paper. So take this handout and do the first exercise, for example.
So it's got two meanings. It's a piece of paper, probably a photocopy, from a teacher, or
A printout.
a printout, or it can be money you're given for doing no work.
Exactly.
For example, the dole, el paro, is a handout. Or if you go to a charity, they might give you a handout. Something for nothing.
If you like watching Western films where cowboys are shooting at each other with guns, then you're probably watching a shootout. Or if there are robbers inside a bank and the police are outside with guns and they're shooting at each other, you could also call that a shootout. So that now means that people are shooting at each other in a very tense situation.
Fallout is the next word, and I would say it has two meanings. For example, if I argue with my girlfriend and we stop speaking, I could say we've had a fallout. We've fallen out. It can be a phrasal verb, as Craig pointed out earlier, or a noun. We've had a fallout. We're not speaking anymore. But there's another meaning of fallout, which can be the consequences after a big event. For example, Chernobyl, right. The fallout after Chernobyl. All of the major consequences that happened as a result of that nuclear accident. There was a huge fallout.
You can also get political fallout after a big political event. The result of what happened is called the fallout. Lookout is the next word, L-O-O-K-O-U-T. So this is a person who is looking out for something. You could put the person up on the hill, on the mountain. They look out for the enemy approaching. So you could say that they are a lookout.
Stakeout is an interesting word. It's S-T-A-K-E plus out, stakeout. A stakeout is when police or FBI or spies or somebody like that, they're basically sitting watching somebody. They're spying on somebody, gathering information, waiting to see what happens. Maybe they've got cameras focused on a particular building or a particular window. Maybe they're also listening to conversations because they put listening devices in the phone. That is a stakeout.
And usually in the movies, they're eating sandwiches or hamburgers and drinking lots of coffee. And on a stakeout.
Yeah, and there'll be fat policemen, maybe donuts as well.
Donuts definitely involved, yeah.
And what those policemen really should do is a workout.
That's right, they should go to the gym because you might know the phrasal verb to work out, to go and do exercise, usually in a gym. But it's also a noun, so a good workout. I went to the gym yesterday and I had a really good workout.
I've got one more for you with the suffix out, a blackout. A blackout can mean whenever there's no more information being given on something. A news blackout. Imagine there's been a coup, C-O-U-P. Some people, maybe part of the army or maybe some rebels, have taken over the government. They've overthrown the rightful president, and they've decided they don't want people to know what's happening because it's more convenient for them. So there's no news on the radio. They've cut the internet connection. You can't get anything on TV. There's a news blackout. No information.
We actually had a blackout 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you had a blackout in your area, but in my street here, there was no electricity for 3 hours.
So that's a power blackout.
We had a power blackout, yeah.
So it can be an information blackout, or as Craig says, a power blackout.
So those are our suffixes with out. Let's finish with a few expressions using the word out that we hope you'll find useful. So if you read out loud, then you're reading with your voice. If you're a Spanish speaker, you'd say en voz alta. So you're actually saying the words that you're reading on the page. And this is very good for your pronunciation. If you read out loud or aloud, then it's good for your pronunciation and practicing your reading skills.
Craig, when was the last time you went out on the town?
Oh, it's been years, mate. It's been absolutely years. I can't remember the last time I went out on the town, but it was possibly with you, with a few friends in Valencia.
So to go out in the town means to go out with other people, have a good time, probably have a drink, enjoy yourself, do whatever you want, have a good time, probably come back very late in the morning. That's to go out on the town. You can have a night out. It's kind of similar to go out on the town. Not exactly the same perhaps, but to have a night out means you don't stay at home. You go out somewhere, maybe to a restaurant, a bar, maybe a theatre, maybe all three things, and enjoy yourself, to have a night out.
And another use of to go out is when there's a fire. So fires ignite, they start burning, and then when they stop burning, they have gone out. And you can use that also for cigarettes. If you're smoking a cigarette, it goes out. That means it stops burning. And the expression to be out has many uses. So we're using the verb to be, which we need to conjugate into different forms to be out. For example, if you are out of beer, there's none left. You don't have any beer. You've drunk it. So that's a crisis, isn't it? You need to go and buy more. You're out of something. In Spanish, agotado.
If I said the sun's out, does that mean there's no more sun?
No, that means you can see it, because even though the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening, it's not always out, because sometimes it's behind clouds. So if it's cloudy, you wouldn't say the sun's out. But if you can see the sun, if the sun's shining, you can say, hey, let's go to the beach. The sun's out.
And in a tennis match, if the umpire, that's like the referee, cries out, what's happened?
That means the ball is not in play. It has landed outside the line of the tennis court. So you lose a point if it's out.
So what if the umpire in cricket says out?
That means the batsman needs to finish batting and has to walk outside because he can't bat anymore. He's been bowled out.
It's really complicated, isn't it, listeners? Two sports and two completely different meanings of out.
When I had a blackout 2 weeks ago in my flat, my wife said, hey, Craig, the lights are out. So if the lights are out or if the electricity is out, it's not working.
There's an outage. That means the electricity is out. If we want to make it a noun, particularly in American English, they're very fond of this word, an outage.
If you make a film or a book, then you need to release it to the public. And you can say it's out. So if it's available to buy or available to be seen, then the film is out or the book is out.
For example, they might talk about the new film starring George Clooney will be out next week. It will be released next week.
And out can also mean unconscious. For example, you fall over or you hit your head and you can say, I was out for almost 5 minutes. That means you lost consciousness, like you're asleep. I was completely out means I was unconscious.
Craig, the last time I made a meal for someone, they told me 9 out of 10 for effort.
Outstanding, outstanding, mate.
Yeah, although they said 2 out of 10 for taste, but 9 out of 10 for effort. So 9 out of 10, 9 is the marks I got. Out of means the maximum 10.
That sounds like my talent for dancing tango. I've recently started to learn the tango. So you could say, yeah, Craig, 9 out of 10 for motivation, but unfortunately 1 out of 10 for actual dancing skills.
Craig, when was the last time you saw out of order on a piece of paper stuck on a machine?
I think it was at the hospital a long time ago when I wanted a drink, a coffee, and it was out of order. If you see an out of order sign, that means the machine is not working. You also see it sometimes in toilets, public conveniences. If you can't use a particular thing, then you see an out of order sign. But you can also use it for a person, can't you? What does that mean?
Yeah, totally different if it's for a person. If you say a person is out of order, it means that they are behaving or speaking in an inappropriate way, an unacceptable way. For example, imagine I nearly accidentally collided with someone in the street. Nearly, but not quite. and I said, oh, sorry. And this person said to me, yeah, so you should, you stupid idiot. Watch where you're going. I might say, hey, that's a bit out of order. There's no need to speak like that. I think it's inappropriate.
When you go to the supermarket and you buy something, it usually has a date on it by which you need to eat or consume or drink the product. That's called the sell-by date, the date that you have to sell it by or the date that you have to eat it by. So if it's past that date, you can say it's out of date, which means it's past its date, it's too old. And in a similar way, you could say that my taste in clothes or my taste in music is out of date. It's not current, it's not modern.
So in that second meaning, it's kind of a synonym for outdated.
Exactly.
Speaking of time, another common expression with out is before the, and then you add a time expression, before the day is out, before the week is out, before the month is out, before the year is out. So before the week is out, Craig, I imagine, will have edited this podcast. Am I right?
I hope so. Before the week is out, it should be edited and published.
So before the week is out, today it's Tuesday. So he will have finished before Sunday, before the week is out.
Another use of out with the verb to be, so to be out, means it's not an option. For example, imagine Reza and I wanted to go to the beach, but suddenly it's raining. Reza could say, no, Craig, it's not an option today. It's not a good day to go to the beach. It's out. So if something is out, it's not possible. It's not an option.
And we can use out twice in the same expression. We've got a nice colloquial expression, which is out and out. If I say to you, John, don't believe a word he says. He's an out and out liar. Not just a liar, an out and out liar. He's a complete liar, an absolute liar, 100% liar. Don't believe a single word. He's an out and out liar. So it usually goes with a negative thing. An out and out liar, an out and out cheat, an out and out rascal, something like that.
Reza, do you think this episode was useful for the listeners, or was it an out-and-out disaster?
Oh, I wouldn't say it was an out-and-out disaster. I would say, though we may be a bit outdated in some things, I think this episode was pretty useful.
Outstanding, my friend. So that's all we have for this week. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. But now it's your turn to practice your English. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us a voice message. You can do that by going to SpeakPipe, that's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, and leave us a nice voice message.
If you prefer, you could write to us. You could send us an email. You could find Craig at this address, craig@inglespodcast.com, or write to me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you're interested in purchasing and buying an online course, go to store.mencioningles.net, where you'll see a selection of courses that you can buy.
As always, we'd like to thank our listeners who support us through the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon. And what they do is they donate as little as $1.20, and that 20 cents is to cover VAT, the tax. And as a thank you to those people, we give them instant access to recent audio transcriptions.
For more information, go to Patreon, that's patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And thank you to all of you who are supporting us on Patreon. We don't know what we'll be speaking about next week, but we promise you we will be speaking about something. So thank you very much for listening to this episode. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's over and out from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.